Hey y'all, I'm Patrick Haggerty with ROI Training, and today I want to talk about a new Google Cloud Kubernetes feature, container image streaming. Container image streaming is a new feature from Google that is designed to essentially speed the start time for Kubernetes containers. Kubernetes is an excellent container orchestration system. Currently, the way Kubernetes works when you launch a new container is Kubernetes reaches out to your container registry, it downloads the entire image, then it starts the container. The problem is some images are on the large side, and that download the whole image before you start can slow things down like autoscale events. My load's going up, my load's going up. I want to have my Kubernetes cluster add some new replicas of my container to handle this extra load through some horizontal scaling event. Yeah, but that download process can slow that process, the start time of those new containers. Maybe I'm doing a rolling update and I'm updating an existing container. Same thing. Downloading the whole container onto each of my machines can take a lot of time. The way container streaming works is Google essentially downloads a shell of your container and launches it in the cluster. It then uses an API to connect to the container image over in the artifact registry, right? The connection allows the file system of the container to be accessed remotely while the container streams down the rest of the image. Once the entire image is streamed down, then again, either off of the hard drive on the cluster node or out of memory, it'll switch kind of the route from being sort of a virtual path to the artifact registry to a local path. Now, I have a helpful links file where I have all kinds of Google Cloud related links. You can find the live version at gcp.help. If you go to gcp.help, it just redirects you to this Google Doc here. If your organization doesn't allow you to access Google Docs or Google Docs outside of your org, I also have a PDF version you can find at files.gcp.how/links.pdf. That version isn't live, but I update it every couple of weeks or so. If you look at my table of contents in my compute technologies, I have a bunch of Kubernetes related links. In the Kubernetes links, I have some GKE specifics. And if I go to my some GKE specifics down the last couple of links you'll see are links on streaming. The first link is a link to the blog post where Google talks about this new feature going GA. The second link is a link to the documentation page itself. Now, to help demo this feature, I went over into a project that I have, and I've created a couple of clusters here. Okay, a cluster regular and a cluster streaming. If I go to my cluster streaming and I look at the features, you'll see that image streaming is enabled. See the pencil icon? If you have a cluster that is already created, you can go find that feature and click the pencil icon and enable it if you like. That's the first of the requirements. In that second link I just showed you, they talk about some of the benefits. They also talk about the requirements, right? The first requirement is you have to have a relatively new version of Kubernetes. Next, the image that you're accessing has to be in artifact registry. It can't be in, say, Google Container Registry. It needs to be in the newer artifact registry. Also, you need to make sure your container file system API is enabled or this won't work. That whole load the shell and then kind of connect to the container remotely, that's actually the container file system API that supports that. So if you click on that link in that document, it'll actually show you is that API enabled in your project or not. Mine is. Okay. Now, they talk in here a little bit about like gcloud commands that you can use to create new clusters with this feature enabled or how you enable it. They also have a nice example here. Google has some example apps they use. As a matter of fact, if you look at my links file and you scroll way down towards the bottom, I have a little tools and dev section. And in my tools and dev section, I have a demo code subsection. And I have a link to Kubernetes sample apps. If you go to the Kubernetes sample apps, you'll see the Guestbook app. That's actually the application that I'm using for this demo. The Guestbook app I can load using this YAML file right here. There's a path to the image. Again, that image is in artifact repository, so that's the right kind of setup. You'll see the image is 327 megs. Okay, so it's not a monster image, but it's a decent size image. Now, I've already set up my Cloud Shell so it knows how to access my two clusters, and it's initially set to access my regular cluster. Also, I've taken this example deployment YAML file and I've recreated it in my Cloud Shell environment. So let me go to my regular cluster. Hey kubectl, please apply everything in the file front end YAML. This is going to deploy it into my regular cluster. Now, when you deploy into a cluster like that, the cluster actually sets up a series of events to let you know what's happening. You could do kubectl get events if you wanted to see the events. You also can actually go look at it in logging. If I go over here and I go to logging, logging's about halfway down here. Yeah, there we go, logging. And I go to Logs Explorer. Let me open that up in a new tab here. So if I go to Logs Explorer, all these Kubernetes related events are captured in a log file named events. So let me go over here to events. Let me add that to my query and run, and it will show me my events. You can see, for example, right here is where it's creating my front end pod. So it built a replica set, it's creating my pod, it assigned it to one of the nodes, one of the VMs, it's pulling the image right there, and you'll see in this line right here, successfully pulled the image from its location, took it about 14.5 seconds, okay? Then you see the starting and everything else. Okay, so that's the way it works in a regular cluster. Now let me do the same thing in my streaming cluster. So let me use my kube context command to switch to my streaming cluster. And in my streaming cluster, I'm going to do the exact same thing, right? I'm going to go ahead and apply that front end, deploy one copy of that front end application into my streaming cluster. Okay. Now let me go back to my Logs Explorer and let me rerun that same query. If I rerun the same query, you'll notice what it says is same kind of steps here, right? Where I see it created the pod, it assigned it, it says pulling image, right? Pulling image. And then you see this log right here. The container front end is backed by image streaming, okay? And then I get the successful pulled command. It took 1.13 seconds. Okay, so that's how long it took to basically grab the shell and get the shell launched. Okay, so our two differences here, right? In the regular, it did the pull and it took it about 14, 15 seconds to pull it down. In the streaming, it took it about a second. Yeah, that's because it doesn't have to pull the entire image. It's kind of got to build the heart of the container. It can launch that heart of the container while it's waiting for the rest to kind of stream down behind the scenes, right? So again, to look at it another way, I can see up here, I see it successfully assign the pod, okay? Then I see at 12:54 and 8 seconds, it starts pulling the image. I see at 12:54 and 23 seconds, it successfully pulled the image, and I see it starting to create everything, right? Down here, again, I see it successfully assigned it. I see at, 12:55 and 40 seconds, it started pulling. It then lets me know that it's streaming, and then again, at a second later, I see that it has successfully pulled the image, and I see those same container creating. So from the moment it started to load to the time it started creating the containers, less time, right? A 20th of the time. Okay, yeah, you won't always see that big of a performance, but still, it's a nice illustration of what streaming images does for you, right? From the time you launch something like a scale command or update command or something like that, the time to get that image actually into production is cut fairly drastically. Excellent. Nice example of a new Google Cloud feature, container image streaming. I'm Patrick Haggerty with ROI Training, and I hope you found this video useful.